Ethan sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the dull walls that seemed to close in on him. He felt trapped, not by his job or his schedule, but by the invisible rules of his life. The same streets, the same routines, the same thoughts, day after day. He wondered if anyone had ever truly escaped the limits of their world. One evening, while reading an old book on science and consciousness, something strange caught his eye. A sentence spoke to him as if it were written for him alone. The universe responds to the observer, not the observed. He read it again, slowly, feeling a shiver run down his spine. Could it really be possible that simply noticing, simply being aware, could change the world around him? Ethan tried to shake it off, but the idea kept growing inside his mind. What if reality was not fixed, but flexible? Waiting for him to see the possibilities, he closed his eyes and imagined a small change in his day, just turning left instead of right on his way to work. The next morning, he did it, almost by accident, and the city felt different, lighter, as if it were responding to his choice. The experience left him both amazed and unsettled. Could such a small action really ripple through reality, or was it just coincidence? He began experimenting. Tiny observations, small intentions, testing the boundaries of his world. Each time, he noticed subtle shifts. A stranger smiling at the corner, a train arriving exactly on time, a feeling of opportunity where there had been none. Soon, Ethan realized that the world he had taken for granted was more like clay than stone. He started to see patterns in the chaos, connections that had been invisible before. He remembered the line from the book again, "The universe responds to the observer," and it began to feel less like a metaphor and more like a rule. One night, as he sat quietly, focusing on a thought without words, he noticed something extraordinary. A bird landed outside his window, perfectly still, watching him, as if it knew he was watching. The feeling was electric, almost magical, yet it was not magic at all. It was something real, a hidden layer of life that few had ever noticed. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. He realized that everything he had thought was fixed, the routines, the habits, the limits might only be fixed because he believed they were. What would happen if he could truly escape the invisible walls around him? If he could step beyond the expectations of his mind in the world? The thought was thrilling, but also frightening, for stepping beyond what is known always carries risk. By the end of the week, Ethan's life had already started to change. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or sudden miracles, but in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. Doors opened, conversations shifted, opportunities appeared where none had existed before. He felt the first real hint of freedom, the first real taste of what it might mean to escape the limits of his environment. And yet, the biggest discoveries were still ahead. The universe had shown him a glimpse of its secret, but only a glimpse. A world where observation and intention could shape reality, where mind and matter danced together in ways he had never imagined. Ethan leaned back, heart pounding, and whispered to himself, "If this is real, everything is possible." Ethan could not stop thinking about what he had experienced. The idea that his mind could influence reality lingered in every corner of his thoughts. He felt a mixture of excitement and fear, as if he had stumbled into a hidden world that most people never see. He began reading more, searching for clues in science and philosophy. He learned about quantum physics, a strange and mysterious branch of science that seemed to challenge everything he thought he knew. He read about particles that could exist in multiple places at once, about tiny possibilities waiting to be observed before they became real. The words fascinated him, but they also confused him. Ethan was not a scientist, yet he felt a strange connection, as if these concepts were describing something he had always sensed in his own mind. He began to wonder if the world he experienced was just one version of many, a version shaped by the way he looked at it. Late one night, he sat quietly in his apartment, imagining a simple experiment. He would focus his mind on something small, something possible, yet uncertain. He thought of a coin he had in his hand, a coin that could land either heads or tails. He concentrated, feeling the weight of the choice, not forcing it, just observing the possibilities. When he flipped the coin, it landed exactly the way he had imagined. Again and again, Ethan's heart raced. Could his focus, his attention, really affect even something as small as a coin? He knew it was not luck. He felt the certainty deep in his mind. This was more than chance. It was a hint of the hidden power of observation. He began applying the same principle to other parts of his life. Small decisions, small intentions. He noticed subtle shifts. A lost book appeared just when he remembered it. A quiet stranger offered help unexpectedly. A missed bus turned into a timely meeting that changed his day. Each incident felt like a whisper from the hidden world, telling him he was seeing only a fraction of what was possible. Ethan realized that most people live their lives without ever noticing these hidden possibilities. They walk through the world as if it were fixed, unaware that their awareness itself could shape outcomes. He felt a strange thrill, imagining the freedom in understanding this secret, in learning to act consciously in a world that responded to observation. He remembered a line from a philosopher he had read: "Consciousness is not just inside you. It is a force that reaches outward." Ethan felt this truth in his bones. It was not just about thinking or wishing. It was about noticing, focusing, and gently participating in the unfolding of reality. As the night deepened, Ethan closed his eyes and imagined more than small changes. He imagined entire possibilities, worlds where he was freer, braver, more connected. The feeling was dizzying, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that stepping forward could open new dimensions of experience. And in that moment, he understood that this hidden quantum world was not a place to escape, but a place to explore. He was only beginning to see the infinite paths his mind could take. Each observation a choice, each intention a doorway. The adventure had just begun, and the mysteries of the mind waited for him to dive deeper. Ethan had begun to notice patterns in the world that others seemed to miss. It was as if the city itself responded to his attention. Yet he still wondered if it was real or just coincidence. He needed to test it, to see if his awareness could truly change outcomes. One morning, he decided to experiment in a simple way. He focused on finding a parking spot near his office, something he usually struggled with. He imagined the spot waiting for him, empty and inviting. He arrived and, to his astonishment, the perfect space was open, as if it had appeared just for him. The experience thrilled him, but he did not rush to conclusions. He knew the mind could play tricks, so he repeated the experiment in different situations. He imagined a friend calling him, and soon after, his phone rang with that exact person on the line. Finding a quiet corner in a crowded cafe, and miraculously, one chair was open exactly where he wanted to sit. Ethan realized he was witnessing the observer effect in action, a principle from quantum physics that suggested reality changes when it is observed. He thought about particles that exist in many states until someone looks at them. Suddenly, it all made sense. His attention, his focus, was like the observer in the experiment, shaping reality without force or effort. He began testing it in more meaningful ways, not just parking spots or chairs, but small choices that could shift his life. He imagined talking to a colleague with curiosity instead of hesitation, and the conversation turned into a new opportunity. He focused on noticing beauty in the city streets, and suddenly the mundane became magical, each detail sparkling with life. At first, Ethan felt cautious, afraid that he might be imagining too much, but each success, small or large, built his confidence. He understood that observation was not wishful thinking, but a form of participation. In reality, by noticing possibilities instead of problems, he began to see a world full of openings and chances. Even more surprising, Ethan noticed changes inside himself. He felt calmer, more aware, and more present. His mind seemed to stretch, as if it were expanding to match the possibilities he saw outside. He realized that observing reality also meant observing himself, seeing the habits, fears, and limits that had quietly controlled his life. One evening, he walked along a quiet street, paying attention to the rhythm of his steps and the patterns of light around him. He imagined kindness and curiosity flowing through him, and the world reflected it back. A stranger smiled, a dog approached gently, and a soft wind carried the scent of flowers he had never noticed before. Ethan began to understand a deeper truth. The observer effect was not just about changing small events, it was about awareness itself. Every moment he noticed, every choice he observed, it was shaping his reality. The world was not a fixed stage, but a responsive canvas, waiting for him to participate. By the end of the night, Ethan felt a thrill he had never known. He realized that the mind was more powerful than he had ever imagined, that awareness could influence the smallest details and the largest possibilities. And as he returned home, he knew that understanding this effect was only the beginning, a key to unlocking doors he had never dared to open. Ethan woke up with a new sense of awareness. The world no longer felt like a cage, but a playground of possibilities. Yet he also realized something important. The limits he had always felt were not just in the streets, the office, or the city. They were in his mind, hidden in habits, fears, and unspoken rules. He remembered the moments when he had avoided challenges, choosing comfort over growth. He saw that these choices were not random, but patterns he had repeated for years. He began asking himself hard questions. Why do I accept limits that are not real? What would happen if I didn't? The questions felt dangerous, yet exciting. Like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into unknown waters. Ethan decided to experiment. This time, he would test the limits inside his mind. He imagined talking openly to people he had always avoided, sharing ideas he had kept to himself. He focused on noticing fear without letting it control him, observing it like a cloud passing through the sky. At first, his heart raced, and doubt whispered in his ear. He worried that stepping beyond familiar boundaries would lead to failure or embarrassment. But he remembered the small successes of observation, and noticing possibilities had shifted reality before. He realized the same principle could apply to his inner world, to his habits and beliefs. He started small, breaking tiny routines, taking new paths, asking questions he normally wouldn't. Each choice, though simple, felt like a tiny act of rebellion against his old limits. A conversation that would normally have been avoided turned into a meaningful exchange. A project he had abandoned long ago suddenly felt doable, as if his mind was clearing space for it. As Ethan practiced, he began to notice patterns in his thoughts, times when fear, self-doubt, or hesitation tried to take control. He learned to watch them without judgment, to observe them like events in the sky. He saw that most of his limits were illusions, reinforced by habit, not reality, and each moment of conscious awareness chipped away at them. He also noticed the environment responding, subtly at first. A colleague who had always ignored him now offered help. A door that seemed closed opened unexpectedly. A chance meeting in a park led to insights that had been hidden before. The world was shifting around him, mirroring the changes he was making. Within, Ethan realized that breaking free was not about forcing change, but about noticing, choosing, and participating consciously. The mind and the world were connected in ways he had never understood. His freedom grew with each observation, each intentional action. Each step outside the old patterns felt like shedding a heavy cloak he had carried for years. By the end of the week, Ethan felt lighter, more alive. The invisible walls he had assumed were real now seemed fragile, even laughable. He knew that breaking free from limits was not a single act, but a journey, a continuous process of awareness, choice, and courage. And as he looked out at the city from his apartment window, he whispered to himself, "The world is not as fixed as I thought, and neither am I." A sense of possibility and power pulsed through him, and he understood that the real adventure was only just beginning. Ethan woke up to a world that felt alive in ways he had never noticed before. The streets seemed brighter, the sounds sharper, and even the air carried a sense of opportunity. He realized that breaking free from limits was only the beginning, and now the real adventure was unfolding. He began to notice small coincidences that seemed to align perfectly with his intentions. A bus arrived just as he stepped outside. A message appeared at the exact moment he needed it. A stranger offered advice that he had not known he was seeking. Each event felt like a ripple, a reflection of his awareness, expanding outward into reality. With each observation, Ethan grew bolder. He imagined outcomes where he had once imagined obstacles. He reached out to people he had hesitated to approach, and doors opened that had always seemed closed. A conversation with a colleague led to an unexpected opportunity. A project he had dreamed of suddenly seemed within reach. Ethan noticed that possibilities were no longer random, but patterns he could influence. He focused on observing the world, with curiosity and wonder, imagining the best outcomes without forcing them. The results were subtle at first, small victories and pleasant surprises, but each one strengthened his belief that he could shape his reality. Even more astonishing, Ethan began to see changes in himself. He felt lighter, more creative, and more connected to the world around him. His thoughts no longer seemed like chains, but tools. Each idea was a seed of possibility, each choice a step toward a reality he had once thought impossible. He started experimenting with bigger possibilities, imagining experiences that stretched his comfort zone. He having meaningful conversations with strangers, and unexpectedly, he found himself in deep discussions that inspired new ideas. He imagined exploring new paths in his career, and doors opened in ways he had never anticipated. Ethan began to see that the universe responded to more than his actions. It responded to his focus, his attention, and the way he noticed the world. Every observation, every mindful intention seemed to ripple outward, influencing events, people, and opportunities. The hidden quantum world he had glimpsed before was becoming real in his life. One afternoon, he walked through a park. Noticing the patterns of sunlight through the leaves, the gentle sway of branches seemed almost alive. As if acknowledging his attention, he smiled, realizing that awareness itself was a form of participation. Every moment held a choice, and every choice held a possibility. By evening, Ethan reflected on the week. The life he had once accepted as fixed now felt like a landscape he could explore and shape. Each day offered new possibilities. Each decision carried the potential for change. He understood that this was not luck or coincidence, but a reflection of his own consciousness interacting with the world. And as he looked at the city lights glowing below, he felt a sense of wonder he had never known. He whispered to himself, "I am part of this world, and this world is part of me. Everything is possible if I notice and participate." Ethan knew that the path ahead was full of unknown adventures, and he was ready to embrace them fully. Ethan sat quietly in his apartment, reflecting on the changes he had experienced over the past weeks. The world felt alive, responsive, and full of endless possibilities. Yet he realized that the true discovery was not outside, but within himself, the way he perceived and engaged with life. He thought about how small observations and intentions had begun to shape reality, from coins and parking spots to meaningful conversations and unexpected opportunities. The patterns were clear. His awareness was not passive, it was active, a force that reached out and influenced the world. Ethan remembered the fear he had felt. At the beginning, the invisible walls of habit and doubt that had seemed impossible to break. Now those walls felt fragile, almost like paper, ready to be reshaped by conscious attention. He understood that freedom was not given, it was noticed and created. He began to see that the quantum world was not a theory reserved for scientists, but a reality that anyone could access. The observer effect, once a mysterious idea in books, was now something he lived every day. Every glance, every choice, every thought carried weight, carrying the potential to shape outcomes in subtle or profound ways. Ethan decided to test the limits of this new understanding. He imagined helping someone in need without expecting anything in return, and a stranger approached him for guidance. He visualized approaching a challenging project with curiosity instead of fear, and solutions appeared that he had never imagined. The world responded to the quality of his awareness, as if consciousness itself was a bridge between possibility and reality. He realized that this was the essence of the quantum you, the part of each person that could escape environmental limits, reshape habitual patterns, and engage creatively with life. It was not about controlling everything, but about noticing everything, participating fully, and allowing possibilities to unfold. Ethan also understood that this journey was deeply personal, yet connected to everything else. His awareness influenced not only his life, but the energy of those around him. Every intention, every act of conscious noticing sent ripples into the world, creating opportunities, harmony, and alignment in ways that could not always be predicted. He smiled, thinking about the first night he had glimpsed this hidden reality, the shiver of curiosity, the thrill of possibility, the fear of stepping beyond the familiar. Now all of it made sense. It had been a doorway into a life where limits were only as real as he allowed them to be. Ethan rose and walked to the window, looking out at the city that now felt alive with infinite potential. He felt a deep gratitude for the quiet power of observation, for the mind that could notice, intend, and create. He whispered to himself, "I am not separate from the world. I am part of its unfolding, and it is part of me. Everything I notice and intend can shape reality. Everything is possible." And in that moment, Ethan felt the true freedom of the quantum you, a life where observation, awareness, and intention were not just abstract ideas, but practical tools to explore, create, and transcend limits. The adventure of consciousness was not in discovering something new outside, but in awakening the infinite possibilities within.